Oh boy, disclaimer.
People may think that becoming a horror fan is easy. All you gotta do is play a few spooky games, watch a few scary movies, and boom, you're a horror fan. Well, you're wrong. It's not that simple. Hell, it's hard to even know where to start sometimes. For starters, there are several subgenres, and there's also many different forms of horror media, and about a gazillion of each of those. Just look at all this! Well, thankfully birthdays are a thing, because for my birthday this year I got this, the 100 must-see horror movies scratch poster. Now, being honest, I've seen the majority of these, but it got me thinking, why not review every movie on this list one at a time? If these are indeed the must-see horror movies, it would be a great way for me to introduce potential fans to the genre, at least as far as movies are concerned. And then I'll scratch them off as I go. I thought about it over a cup of tea and I decided to give it a go. So grab some snacks, turn out the lights, hide under the comfiest blanket you can find, and join me as I take a look at the 100 must-see horror movies. Hey gang, Banterson here. A few weeks ago in this series I took a look at Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was a movie. Well, now it's time to swoop back to the world of vampires and discuss the cult classic, Fright Night. Fright Night is a 1985 vampire horror film written and directed by the legendary Tom Holland, the man who gave us the first installment of the Child's Play franchise. It received critical acclaim and spawned a 1988 sequel and a 2011 remake. The film centres around teenager Charlie Brewster, a horror fan and typical horny teen, who grows suspicious of his new neighbour Jerry after witnessing a series of odd events. And, of course, his theories are proven to be true as he discovers that Jerry is indeed a vampire. Now that might be seen as a spoiler, but being honest, it really isn't. The big reveal happens in the first 15 minutes of the film. The movie focuses less on the investigation and more on Charlie trying to prove to everyone that Jerry is a vampire, only for them to all say he's crazy or imagining everything. He even tries to get the help of famed vampire hunter Peter Vincent, who hosts the horror show Fright Night. Fright Night was rather original for its time. Most vampire movies took place in historical times or abstract locations such as gothic castles and remote areas. Fright Night took place in a small, relatable town in Iowa, bringing the vampire legend to the suburbs and a modern setting. The creep next door concept was hardly original, but making the creep a vampire sure was. The movie also has a huge cult following, with many people referring to it as their favourite vampire film. But is it as good as everyone says? And does it deserve its place on the poster? Well, it's time for me to dive in and find out. But before I do, if you have yet to see Fright Night and don't want anything spoiled for you, skip to this time code to get to the spoiler-free section of the review. Go on, I'll wait. The good. Jerry is freaking awesome. He's one of the best vampires in movie history. Chris Sarandon really took this role and made it his own with his performance. Jerry is the perfect balance between charming and eerily cold. When he's wooing people, you can't help but smile and find him likeable. But when he's his true self, he's a chilling presence that makes your spine tingle. Charlie is also a great protagonist. He's incredibly relatable even all these years later. He's a horror fan, so of course I can relate, but he acts exactly how a teenager would in this situation. His desperation as he tries to convince everyone around him about the truth is agonising, and you find yourself begging people to listen to him. Seeing him slowly go crazy as his mother, girlfriend and best friend don't believe him is tragic, as is seeing his desperate pleas to the police and Peter Vincent. He's a character you can get behind and root for, which is exactly what a protagonist should be. Speaking of Peter Vincent, he is also great fun. He's a washed up horror actor, way past his prime, barely making a living off of his horror TV show Fright Night. Charlie asks him for help in an act of desperation, but gets blown off as a crazed fan. He's later paid to help Charlie's girlfriend Amy and friend Evil Ed to prove to Charlie Jerry isn't a vampire, only to then find out that Jerry is a vampire after his pocket mirror doesn't pick up his reflection. What's cool about him is he goes from being a washed up actor who doesn't care or believe in the supernatural to becoming the film's variant of Van Helsing. Obviously he isn't great at vampire hunting, only just finding out they exist, but he still tries and doesn't back down. It's nice to see a character relive his glory days for real, and his chemistry with Charlie is great. Amy is a great character too. Unlike many girlfriends of the horror genre, Amy isn't a sex-crazed horny teen. In fact, she's very nervous about being intimate with Charlie for the first time. In the opening scene, she shoves Charlie away, but after he snaps at her, she realises he has been patient with her for over a year. I think both have great chemistry together, and you see things from both sides. Amy is finally ready to lose her virginity at the exact same time Charlie starts getting fascinated with uncovering and exposing Jerry's secret. Another great thing about Amy is she resembles an old lover of Jerry's, which is why he becomes fascinated with her. Again, the chemistry here is fantastic and you forget she's a high schooler and Jerry's at least in his late 30s. The premise is solid. Like I said previously, the movie does a great job in bringing vampires to a modern setting. The concept of a next door neighbour being a blood-sucking ghoul is really fun and they did a great job using it to its full potential. The movie, however, still manages to pay homage to classic gothic vampire movies, mostly thanks to Jerry's gothic house. I originally didn't like that as I felt it removed the realistic element of the film, but watching it back, it actually has a perfect balance that works with both die-hard classic fans and new fans who want originality. The pacing and action scenes are really well done as well. There's just enough time between each action scene for you to really get invested into the plot without it just being in your face and constant action all the way throughout the film. The pacing and suspense is really well done in between these scenes, and when you do finally get to the action, it's freaking awesome. The setting is wonderful. One thing I really think is underappreciated about Fright Night is where it takes place. It's not a huge city or an abstract location in Eastern Europe. It's a small town in Iowa, not exactly eye-catching or in your face. But that works in favour of the film because it adds a sense of realism to it. It gives the illusion that this situation could literally happen anywhere, no matter how big or small the place is. It also looks really nice, with the neighbourhood and Jerry's house being eye-pleasing. The visuals and effects are really well done. You can't really beat practical effects, and this movie is chock full of them. First of all, I love the look of the vampires. It's such an abstract and different style to what we were used to at the time. Plus, those widened, gaping mouths and deranged eyes are genuinely chilling. The blood effects are well done, and the deaths of the creatures in the film, such as Jerry's bodyguard, are mesmerising and imaginative. Evil Ed's werewolf transition is up there as one of the best I've ever seen. However, whilst I love these crazy effects used, I also really enjoy the subtle effects used throughout. The best example is when Jerry walks through Charlie's mother's bedroom. As he leaves the room, you can see the door opening and closing in the bedroom mirror, but not Jerry's reflection. Attention to detail like that is just glorious. And the movie's soundtrack is really good too. It does a great job in setting the mood, tone, and pacing depending on what scene you're watching. The bad. Evil Ed sucks. I'm sorry, I know Evil Ed is a very popular character with fans of this film, but goddamn, he's just so annoying. His voice grates on my ears, he's a complete dick and he's just unlikable. At the end of the second act, he's chased through an alleyway by Jerry until he hits a dead end. Jerry manages to convince him to become a vampire and finally be respected by others, which you think would make him awesome. But no! If anything, he's worse as a vampire and he's an incompetent buffoon. Sure, his werewolf transformation is incredible, but aside from that, he's just an annoying character with little to offer. At least for me anyway. Charlie's mother is also a crap character. I just find her completely pointless. Apart from being a stereotypical overbearing mother, she adds nothing to the plot. You would think that her being so adamant that Charlie is wrong would be a bigger part of the story, but it isn't. In fact, she only appears in the first half of the damn film. What was the point? Jerry's bodyguard is another character I don't get either. Who the hell even is he? It's never explained. He's just there as a slight inconvenience to the protagonists. Apparently he's meant to be a ghoul, but that only happens after Jerry resurrects him. Before that, he's just an average guy helping Jerry out. Why? What's the motive? There isn't one and it's just left unexplained, which not only makes no sense, but also makes Jerry seem weaker. He's this awesome vampire with supernatural powers and he has some random guy as his bodyguard? Really? And he's not even fierce or cool. If anything, he comes across as that kid at school who claims to be the cool kid's best friend and does everything in his power to show it. He's more annoying than interesting. The movie does have a few inconsistencies too. Aside from the previously mentioned disappearing mother and lack of motive for Jerry's henchmen, the movie has some odd moments that don't add up. In one scene, Jerry kills two bouncers at a nightclub, having no issue showing off his supernatural strength and powers. This makes no sense because up to this point, he had been extremely careful to hide his vampire side. Why is he now all of a sudden happy to show it off? And the ending makes no freaking sense. Charlie and Amy are in his room when he thinks he sees a pair of glowing red eyes in what was Jerry's room. He dismisses it as him seeing things. We then see the eyes reappear before hearing Evil Ed laughing and talking. That would be a cool twist, but we saw Evil Ed die earlier in the film. He literally has his heart stabbed by Peter Vincent and slowly dies. So how is he here? These things can be explained with a few lines from a character or something, but they aren't. It makes the film feel rushed and out of order. The overall. Fright Night is an interesting film that took the vampire legend and gave it a fresh coat of paint. That alone makes it a film worth checking out in my opinion. However, don't be shocked if you find some flaws throughout the film. It has some annoying and pointless characters, and there are enough inconsistencies to leave viewers scratching their heads at points. It's definitely a flawed film, but what horror movie isn't? In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find a flawless film out there. At the end of the day, the point of a film is to entertain people, and Fright Night is an entertaining movie. The plot is original and easy to follow, there are some great action scenes and some wonderful atmosphere thrown into the mix. It lives up to its concept really well, and the scenery, visuals and practical effects are great to watch and very memorable. Add to that a great score, some fantastic protagonists and an even better villain, and you have a great vampire flick. Sure, it's got its issues, but the good by far outweighs the bad here. This is a fun, entertaining horror film that is a must-watch during the Halloween season. If you haven't watched this movie yet, I highly recommend it as an entry into any collection. And that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Have you ever seen Fright Night? What did you think of the film? Let me know in the comments below. I've been Banterson, and I'll see you soon.